Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, I'm going to call the August 17th, 2021 meeting of the Fairport Industrial Development Agency to order. And for attendance, Kevin Clark is in attendance, Leslie White, Ken Rohr, Donna Stefano has joined us by phone, and Rob Gettner has an excused absence. I'll ask if there's any public comment. And seeing no one and hearing no one, I'll close the public comment portion of the IDA meeting. And the next item on the agenda is approval of the July 19th meeting minutes. We do not have a quorum, so that will be tabled until the next meeting for approval. So we'll move into resolution 2021-08, authorizing payment of the IDA bills.
Having reviewed them in detail, I would move payment of the bills.
Second.
Is there discussion or questions?
I want to note that the payment to Bruckner Till will be reimbursed by Canal East LLC.
That is the appraisal.
Correct.
Correct.
That came in yesterday.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions regarding the IDA bills? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Reviewing the IDA cash and investments. Nothing has really changed in those, correct, Martha?
Correct.
Discussion or questions regarding any of that? The investment report from Tompkins. No real changes there. Anything, Ken, that stands out on any of the Tompkins reporting?
No.
All right. And the financial statements, P&Ls, anything there, Martha, that you would like to? Nothing out of the extraordinary.
Nothing extraordinary.
Month.
No.
Okay. Anyone have anything on financials that you would like to discuss? Okay. Well, we will, how do you want to do the executive session?
Why don't we move that to the end of the meeting before we adjourn?
Of the IDA meeting?
Yeah.
Okay. And so we will go into, we have two proposals that were received, well, actually multiple proposals, but for two different projects for landscaping at Thomas Creek Butterfly Garden and the North Main Street parking lot. So we can kind of discuss them as one. And Martha, if you want to.
Right. As you know, we've been struggling a little bit with the butterfly garden. The real problem was that in those initial 2 to 3 years, it didn't receive the attention it needed in order to establish itself. And so weeds were allowed, to take over, and we lost quite a bit of plants there. We did have Josh Landscape come out and give us an estimate for maintaining it, because the person who had been maintaining it for us was just doing the weeding. They couldn't spray. They could do mulch, but it would be a very, it'd be a complicated timing process, yada, yada. So I was looking for somebody that could do the entire thing. So Josh Landscape came out and gave us this estimate. I do not have the breakdown of the plantings, because you see that initial 11.7 there is quite, that's a lot higher than I thought. But if you look at the maintenance that they're proposing later on, I imagine that a good portion of that 11.7 is the replanting. So I need to get some additional detail on that. One thing I will note is that their hourly rate is $48 for the maintenance, I believe, and we are currently paying $60. But I don't know if the 48 is related to, they get a good upfront with the planting and so forth. But it's a job unto itself for sure. So I don't know what we can do at this time
Yeah, and I just have to say, it struck me $17,654 just sounds like an awful lot of, nothing that I was expecting to be.
I was
like
floored.
that.
I was floored. But I think what is the ongoing maintenance is like 1,600, right? Every other time they come out, it looks like, right?
Yeah.
Our fall cleanup was a little more expensive. But it includes the things like the spraying and so forth. It's like a one-stop shop. So
Can you just wait till September?
yeah, it's not addressing the issue. I mean, yes, we could, and just
So the assessment of what plants are needed, there's an awful lot of plantings that, I mean, I'm looking at the numbers that they, I mean, this even calls, putting some stone dust on the trail.
Oh, that was when the stone dust passed down to the sundial is completely washed out, essentially. Because it's on an angle, and so every time it rains, it just all collects down at the bottom. So I asked her to include that as well, just to give us an idea, to bring it back to what it should be. And again, it was a landscape architect that came out. Actually, it's John Reddington's wife, who is now with, and so they want to plant, So with the idea that you plant stuff that will overtake and therefore reduce the amount of weeds eventually. So, because we did lose quite a bit.
And then the second one is for North Main, for the parking lot.
Yes, and she gave me a little detail behind the what they're planning there. Again, because it wasn't addressed when it first went in, it's new landscaping. A lot of those weedy trees have taken root and really overtaken the plantings there. It looks terrible. I mean, in the end, we could just dump stone there and be done with it if you want, and call it a day. That was, I remember, was it Macedon? He tried to convince us to just dump a bunch of stone on the hillside. And we went with the plantings, but the basics are out there. It's just that it needs almost to start over, honestly, with the North Main parking lot.
And I think that's something we need to ask ourselves. I mean, it's a big nut. I think
Yeah.
And should this be our role, or are there other better ways of dealing with this?
Right.
I don't know the answer, but I think it's worthy of discussion if we're talking these kind of numbers.
Yes.
Because we're talking $30,000 between the two projects, and I don't know that we want to get into something like that.
Right. And with the North Main parking lot, the idea was that that's pretty low. It's not fussy. It's a low growth sumac. It's meant to overtake the hill and not require the weeding and so forth. And that was not carved out from the DPW. The expectation was that they would maintain that. If we can get it to that state where it doesn't require them to, but, I think we've learned, over the last few years, the limitations or expectations and so forth. I did reach out to Kieran Hanna at the town about having them help us with the butterfly garden, but I have not. I talked with him and then sent him a couple of follow-up emails, but.
And he never responded?
No. He was open to the idea, but when we were talking, he couldn't really talk through it. So I will say Paul Feely of our DPW, I reached out to him because there's concerns with the knotweed at Thomas Creek. So Paul's going to work with the town to use their brush hog. The town of Parenton comes out and cuts that back, but that's an invasive species that really we should have a whole plan of managing, actually, wetland wise, but that is not on that's a future project. So but it's overtaking the path, it's overtaking the signage, the public art sign at the far end, so we are addressing that, hopefully. So That's the latest on these two.
It's kind of hard to judge too. This year was so wet, weeds are gross.
Oh,
I mean, maybe it's a lot of fun. If they overtook it.
yeah. Yeah.
It's hard to judge. Yeah.
So, that's Leslie.
It is a lot of money,
Oh.
and the assumption it would be next year, the butterfly garden would be primarily maintenance, not a lot of planting, so that built-in expense there would be down. There's wants, needs, and butterfly garden, as lovely as it is kind of a want. Parking on the north side feels like a need. I don't want to lose either one of them. Are there, great if a Fairport Garden Club wanted to maintain that. No such thing, I'm sure.
No. Now, we could reduce the size of the butterfly garden and perhaps, because there is a path through there. We take everything, north of the path and replant it up into the other one, maybe, just reduce the size. I think there's more things we have to evaluate.
I like it, but I just question how many people even know what it is or really like it.
I get
was just
called.
gonna ask if anybody has ever complimented us.
Oh, yeah.
No one has
There's a
said it.
person over in the condos across the way who comes over and sometimes sweeps. I mean, she,
Not that they count frogs, is it?
no, frog counting is different. I'm out there frequently. It is a spot, and it's, the children, I see families there, clambering over the stones and enjoying the garden. I do.
And I agree, the sundial is unique in what it is, but the appreciation for the butterfly garden other than color.
Well, one of the things we don't have there is signage to explain that it is a butterfly garden and what we're, the pollinator routes and all that kind of stuff. That's lacking. So.
Donna, you have thoughts on any of that?
Well, I think your last question is interesting because I've actually brought two people down this summer who live in the village who I didn't bring. I walked them over there because they didn't realize it was a butterfly garden. So the signage I think would be interesting, but that doesn't address the cost issue.
What were their when you introduced them? Were they like, oh, okay, or did they like, oh, that's
no? They were fascinated. They were very fascinated. They're like, yeah, we heard this is for the butter. Yeah, I mean, I think signage would be really, really good, interesting, a great learning experience. But and then you see kids groups, school groups, once in a while down on the canal exploring. It could be something you could, reach out to schools to let them know to bring the kids there if they don't normally. So I wonder if the cost is a concern, if that idea of cutting back would be good. Otherwise, I gotta say I feel it's worth the investment.
Should we go back to Nicole and say the cost is, we appreciate the value of it, but the cost is getting to be more than the board is excited about, and ask for suggestions?
Oh, sure.
For scaling back? Does that sound reasonable?
Yes.
To see, still have it, but just kind of, what can we do to minimize our costs?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And, normally I'd say, well, we should go out to, put it out to bid, but that's not practical because this is unique. And, you're never going to have apples to apples on what people are providing. So it's more professional services.
Yes. All right.
Is that reasonable to everybody?
Mm-hmm.
Give it one more shot and see what happens, and then if we do, to get under a planning season time or whatever, maybe we can usually call a special meeting that we could get a quorum here to approve something.
Okay,
Okay?
great.
All right.
Thank you. What about the North Main parking lot, though?
I guess I'd like to revisit the whole thing, and we just ask her to revisit. So,
Oh, okay, both of them. And should I get a price of just putting rock on the hillside?
and I'll tell you what, that's maintenance in itself too.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, because there's crap growing up.
There's no, okay. How about sealing it in asphalt?
That you better ask Mr. Reddington about. Mr. Reddington.
Oh, that was Mr. Spencer.
Oh,
That
oh,
was
that's
Andy
right,
Spencer's.
That's Andy Spencer.
Yes. Okay.
Okay, we're gonna move on to, we have a RFP that has been put together. We looked at it once and then, and this is basically, you changed a few things on it from the one that we had seen last month.
I kind of finished it out.
Right.
And
Made that a
there,
little-
again, I'm trying to emphasize in this RFP that the work we're looking for has to build on the economic development study that we already
Yeah.
have in place.
And I guess that's my biggest question that I'd like to discuss is the RP reads that it shall be based on, and it's going to be based on, and I'm a little uncomfortable using the phrase based on, you know, and that it just, and I know what we're doing is saying that that is the tool that, you know, and you just said now build on, and I kind of think I prefer that. It's just, I'm not comfortable enough with the study that was given to us to say that it should be based on the information was in there. Because I think there may be some gaps in there that somebody needs to do without duplicating.
Yes.
That was just a personal opinion as I was going through that.
Right. Well, I tried to incorporate that when I say it's incumbent on them to identify, to review the study and identify areas of study that would be necessary to complete their work.
Yep.
But I get the part about.
And then, yeah, I mean, it says that in most.
Let me see. Okay, so where the word based appears, we might replace that with build on.
Yeah, or some.
Because I don't want them coming back and saying, well, we have to do our own study. It's like.
Yeah, no, I
Yeah.
get that.
Yeah.
That makes total sense. But just maybe my thoughts on the study.
You want to take the study and move it forward.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
advancing it,
Yeah.
building on.
Okay.
Get our thesaurus out.
Pardon?
Get our thesaurus out.
Oh, yeah, okay, so I'll look to you, Leslie. So do we just simply replace will be based on the information provided with will
And maybe it
build
doesn't make any
on?
difference. It's just,
No, that's okay. That's a valid observation. So,
Under scope of services, letters C, D, and E, I think word for word read exactly the same.
yes,
And that's on purpose?
because I look at how other RFPs are structured, and those components are broken out like economic analysis, assets and resources, SWOT analysis. So I could say those three, I could shorten it by saying
Oh, I see, yeah.
those three components were already undertaken.
I just didn't know if there was a cut and paste job that got overlooked.
No, it was on purpose.
the other one, and I might be missing it, but when we, on letter I for the Economic Development Strategic Plan,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm looking at the old one, right? The consultant will provide a economic development strategic plan to the project steering committee and the full IDA board for adoption. Is there any place that we're talking about putting this plan out to stakeholders prior to our adoption or to the public prior to our adoption?
I think There is a B, stakeholder outreach.
Yeah, and that's for input. And I'm looking more for the output side.
Oh,
When they have put together the plan and we're saying this is what we want to do. Does this make sense to y'all?
okay.
And whether it's just stakeholders or stakeholders in public. In the spirit of transparency. Okay.
Okay, that's, mm-hmm.
Do we need to check with Scott?
No, we did not.
We are live. So that's a very good, I can add that component in, that,
And we'll
that,
figure out the best way to do that
Mhm.
once we retain somebody, but
yes. Mm-hmm. That's a good add. Okay.
any other thoughts or comments regarding this thing before we roll it out? Oh, you also gave the list, and I was surprised when I looked at it, how few local people there are that provide that service, and some of the ones that were on the list that are from, I don't know, way away.
Mm-hmm.
But you said you got a lot of that information from your state EDC.
Correct. And then I have, rather than include it in the package here, I already have seen examples of their work here in New York State. So, you know, they get involved down in Corning or Chemung County or whatever. They've done work here locally within New York. So that's why I included them.
Is your target to roll this out September 1? Is that what you were saying?
That's right. I think if we look at the project timeline on page 60, I was trying to get it done by December, but if the way the calendar worked, Lily and I worked through this calendar a couple times trying to figure out the best way to get it done, but we have it formally adopted, hopefully January of 22. By the time we release it, get any questions back, answers out, then we wanted to have I have a component in here where we interview them in a subcommittee situation. I mean, that takes up time by itself unless we want to just do it right at a board meeting. But we ended up with January. Anybody concerned about that timeline? Oh, okay, good. Okay.
I won't be here, but
So, and then they'll get a complete copy within the RFP. The economic development study will be provided to them, you know, in full. We'll also advertise on our website. The EDC is also going to circulate it as part of their website and their newsletter. You know, Camoin is very often in the mix for these types of things. I've seen a lot of their work. MRB Group was going to be the sub to Ingalls when the village did the comp plan to provide the economic development portion of that. And then I've seen work of all these other this other group as well.
sure. I may look at it and have a couple more suggestions for you before you do that. But
Okay. Let me just go back to my timeline here. Well, could we talk about a date when you might have those to me so I can adjust my timeline?
Friday.
Thank you. Okay. So any other comments for the RFP for economic development to me by Friday? Leslie's dying to say something.
No, I'm just looking at the calendar, and is this, you know, giving them 6 to 8 weeks to develop their plan, recommended plan? Is that enough time to give us something interesting beyond a cookie cutter?
I think it is. In fact, I think it works in our favor, just from my experience in putting plans together. I think the longer it drags out, the more you allow them to drag it out, as opposed to feet to the fire, let's go
Right.
cook this thing.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Donna, thoughts on any of that?
Nope. all sounds good to me.
Okay, so we have a plan there that we're doing.
Yes. So we were, and just to recap, we're gonna change the language a little bit to build on the economic development study and add a stakeholder output review session. Any additional comments due by Friday, and then we'll release it.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Is there any other new or old business before we go into an executive session?
I don't have anything.
Motion to go into executive session.
So
Second. All in favor? Aye.
I want to note that we are currently live streamed, but we will only be coming back to adjourn the meeting.
And the executive session is for the purpose of acquisition, sale, or lease of real property.
Thank you. All right, so I'm ending the live stream.